All right, hello everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, The Carbon Tax Bill 10 Years Later. This event is hosted by republicEn and is part of our Eco-Right webinar series. My name is Wen Lee and I am the Engagement Director at republicEn. I'm very happy to see so many of you joining us, and a lot of people are still coming in right now. Okay, so here's a quick outline of what to expect today. So I'm going to get started by giving a brief introduction and orientation around how to use this webinar platform. And then our very special guest, Bob Inglis, will give a talk about carbon taxes and how the political landscape has changed in the last 10 years. After that, we'll leave plenty of time for you all to ask Bob questions. And of course, that's the really fun part. Okay, so are you conservative and concerned about climate change? Well, you're not alone. republicEn is the place for you. We are conservatives talking to conservatives about climate change and how we can solve it. We call our movement the Eco-Right. Our community consists of thousands of people across the country. Most of us are conservative, but many are libertarian or independent. What we all have in common is the desire to address the serious threat of climate change and to use the power of free enterprise to solve it, and also to cheer on conservative climate leadership in our country. Okay, so this is an interactive webinar. So what we have here is the Zoom platform, and the Zoom platform has a handy dandy chat box, which a lot of you have probably already discovered. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to write hello to everybody in the chat, and you should see, let's see here, you can say if you want to send it to everyone or to just a single person. So I just said hi. So you should see a blinking yellow or orange icon at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that, it opens up the chat box. It's a white box where you can type in things. And so this is where you can type in your comments and your questions throughout today's webinar. And just to make sure that it's working for everyone, let's just quickly, everyone, go into the chat and make sure you're writing to everyone so everyone can see it, and say your name and where you're from, or where you're joining us from, your city and your state. So type in your city and state. So let's see who we've got here today. Oh boy, okay. We've got Asheville, North Carolina, Warrenton, Virginia, Austin, Texas, San Luis Obispo. We've got lots of people coming all over. This is great. Thank you so much for joining us. I see a lot of familiar faces. I see familiar names, I should say. I see some new names. So thank you, everyone. Wonderful. Okay. So of course, we're talking about carbon taxes today. So before we dive in, we're interested to see where you all are at when it comes to this topic. So I'm going to launch a very quick poll. So if you're in front of your computer, a poll should just have popped up in front of you. There are two questions. If you can go ahead and answer them. Number one, how knowledgeable are you about carbon tax policy? I'm very knowledgeable. I understand the basics. I only know a little bit, or I know nothing. Number two, if you had to take a position now, what is your support level for a carbon tax in the US? Strongly support, support, neutral, do not support, or strongly do not support, or not sure. So we'll just wait maybe 15 seconds or so for people to answer, and then we shall see the results together. Okay, 5 seconds. Get your answers in. 4, 3, 2. Okay, I'm ending the poll. Thank you for participating, for those who did. All right, so let's share the results. What we got here. Okay. Here we go. All right. Well, it looks like we have a pretty knowledgeable bunch here. Over half of you say you're very knowledgeable, so that's very exciting. Then a lot of people understand the basics, and then there's some people who only know a little bit. Okay, so that's very helpful for us to see. And also, in terms of question number 2, it looks like the support level for our carbon tax among this group is very high. That's great. Okay, well, we're going to be talking about all of this stuff a lot more in just a second. Okay, let me close this box. Okay, so I'm going to hand the mic over to Bob Inglis now. This is the person you all were here to listen to. So Bob is a former congressman from South Carolina. He is the founder and executive director of republicEn, and he's going to talk about why a carbon tax is conservative. He'll share his experiences about introducing a carbon tax bill in Congress back in 2009 and what has changed since. Now remember, while Bob is talking, please go ahead and type in questions into the chat box as he is speaking. And I will be collecting these into a list. And then at the end, when we do the Q&A session, we will go through as many of these questions as possible. Okay, so without further ado, Bob, please take the stage.
Great. Well, thank you, Wynn. And thank you all for joining us today. This is it's an exciting time to be involved in climate action because things are just beginning to move. So those are words that we're not used to hearing over the last, 5, 6, 7 years. But now they're beginning to move. And so I'm very excited about that. So first, let me substantiate that things are beginning to move. On February the 6th, the Republican side of the House Energy and Commerce Committee issued a press release saying, headline, Republicans are focused on pragmatic solutions to climate change. The next day, 3 of my friends, and they are my friends, Mr. Walden, Mr. Upkin, and Mr. Shimkus, all penned an op-ed, the lead sentence of which was, climate change is real, and we, the Republican leadership on energy and commerce, are here to do something about it. It's basically what they said in the first sentence of that op-ed. And then the following week, my friend, another friend, Frank Lucas, the chairman of the ranking member, of the House Science Committee, had a hearing along with the Democrats, and the Republican witness was none other than our friend Joe Makett from Niskanen Center. And so it's a great new day when you have an actual scientist testifying as a Republican witness at the House Science Committee in favor of climate action. And so pretty exciting time. So things have changed. And so, the title of this webinar was, What's Different Since 2009? Well, 3 things are different. When I introduced the Raise Wages, Cut Carbon Act of 2009, those were the darkest days of the Great Recession. So the first difference is the economy's better. Second difference is that we've all had experiences with climate change now. Contrary to what Mr. Wheeler, who now heads the EPA, was saying yesterday, the impacts of climate change are here now. They're being experienced. And so, when Hurricane Florence drops 50% more rain than it would have, when Hurricane Harvey drops 40% more rain than it would have, when California is on fire, and when the bark beetle continues to chomp through forest in Montana and places like that, and when we get these flooding events all along the coast, and places like Charleston, South Carolina, and Tybee Island in Georgia are flooded in clear day situations, we're all experiencing climate change. And so that's the second key difference, is the impacts of climate change are now accurately seen as here and now, not some long way away. And then the third key difference, I think, is that when I introduced that bill in 2009, there was literally no eco-right, as we call it. We at republicEn.org call ourselves part of the eco-right, and we've got wonderful compatriots in the eco-right. It's a balance to the environmental left. If you think about it, in 2009, there just wasn't an eco-right. There was no republicEn.org. There was no Niskanen Center. There was no R Street Institute. There was no ClearPath Foundation. There was no Climate Leadership Council. There was no Citizens Climate Lobby. There was no conservative caucus of the Citizens Climate Lobby. There was no, I could go on. All these groups, the Alliance for Market Solutions, didn't exist in 2009. What did exist was Americans for Prosperity and the Heritage Foundation. And within about 48 hours of my introduction of the Raise Wages, Cut Carbon Act of 2009, amazingly, David Kreutzer of Heritage had a study that indicated that my bill would single-handedly destroy American civilization. And I don't know how it was he produced that study so rapidly, but it's about 48 hours, as I recall. And so, exhaustive study, you understand. And so that's what we faced in 2009. Contrast that with what Carlos Curbelo, our friend Carlos, faced when he introduced a carbon tax in the last Congress. Well, all those groups that I just mentioned basically rallied around Carlos, saying, yeah, that makes sense, Carlos. It's not exactly the bill that I had in Congress. It's not exactly, say, Citizens Climate Lobby proposal that Carlos was presenting there, but it was a bill, and he was courageous enough to be the first Republican since that bill in 2009 to introduce a bill. So what happened was the eco-right rallied to his support, and those are the three differences. It's now the economy's better. We've all experienced climate change and are having impacts now, and we're realizing that. And then third, the eco-right is here to protect and defend, and to make the case among fellow conservatives. And so that's what those are the key differences, I think, between then and now. And it's pretty exciting, really. And so it's also pretty exciting to see the increase of support in the public, not just what I was just talking about in members of Congress there at the outset, but among the public, there's more an awareness that climate change is real and human caused, and that there's something we can do about it. Wen just showed you one of our most successful Facebook ads, which is basically conservative and concerned about climate change. You're not alone, because for a long time people have felt alone. But we at republicEn.org and all those eco-right organizations I was just listing exist to make it known that no, you're not alone. There are lots with you. And of course, as to the specific policy of pricing carbon dioxide, I mean, just make sure you know that you're definitely not alone, because some great work at our friends at Citizens or Climate Leadership Council, they got something like 3,500 economists to sign on saying, of course, this is the way to deal with climate change, to simply price in the effects of burning fossil fuels into products. You do that, then the free enterprise system can deliver innovation. So I'm realizing that many of you are very knowledgeable, as we indicated, as you just found out in that poll. So you know about carbon taxation, you know about the policy. I wonder now if you want to ask questions about then in 2009 as opposed to now, or the carbon tax policy, or how are we going to get it done from here? So amazingly, I'm not delivering a filibuster. I'm going to stop talking here and see what questions you have. So if you, I think, Wen, the idea is people are putting it in chat, and then you're going to help me figure out what those questions are.
Yep, that's right. So we have a couple questions come in already, but people feel free to add in more because Bob really wants to hear your questions. And in fact, we might even be able to unmute some people so you can ask questions to him directly.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, and also many of you maybe have already used this platform before, but there is an option of showing your face on video if you feel comfortable doing that. On the bottom left of the screen, there is a little camera button that says video on it. If you would like to show your face, you can go ahead and do that, but no pressure if you're like not, if you're like in your pajamas or something. Okay. Okay, so let's see. The first question we got was from R. Zimmerman, and they are asking, where did the term eco-right come from?
Well, that came from our very own Alex Bosmosky, who coined that phrase. We were casting around for some word that would, admittedly a made-up word, that would indicate that, we have an enormous environmental left wing in this country. Literally hundreds of millions of dollars are spent every year on that environmental left wing, and it is a huge wing. It's like a condor wing. And then there's this teeny-weeny right wing, so like a hummingbird size. And so we needed a name for that. So we call it the eco-right, or Alex came up with the term eco-right. And so it's a balance, the eco-right is to the environmental left. And thankfully, it's a term that some journalists have picked up. And we're glad to include not just us at republicEn.org, but all those compatriots I was just mentioning, and hope to mention throughout this. And some of you are, for example, at Citizens Climate Lobby. We're very happy to have all those compatriots as part of the eco-right, particularly the Conservative Caucus. I think I saw my friend Peter Brennan in the list here, and Jim Tolbert. So that's pretty exciting. So we're the eco-right. All of us together is what we call it. But we're republicEn.org.
That's right. Okay, let's see. The next question is from Richard Fryman. Sorry if I misspelled your last name. So he wanted to ask about your 2009 bill. So Richard, are you able to unmute yourself? Do you want to ask a question to Bob directly? Actually, I think I have to unmute you. I just realized. So, no, you can't. Here, I'm going to try to unmute you.
There he goes.
Good job.
Hey, Richard.
Yeah. Yeah, back in 2009, I know I'm with Citizens Climate Lobby, and we have the carbon dividend part of it. In your carbon tax bill from back then, what did you propose to do with the revenue raised from the carbon tax?
Yeah,
Same carbon dividend?
No, my proposal was to cut payroll taxes. That was the recycling mechanism, So we're at republicEn.org. We're ecumenical as to how to recycle the money. We believe that we need to put a price on carbon dioxide, and so that's, I think, what a whole lot of economists. In fact, it's hard to find an economist that doesn't agree with that concept of internalizing the negative externalities associated with the burning of fossil fuels. Just so I don't sound like an economist and that I can unpack that, that means revealing the hidden cost associated with the burning of fossil fuels. You put them in the cost structure, and then the free enterprise system can deliver innovation. So once the negative externality is priced in through a carbon pricing mechanism, we're quite open at republicEn as to how to recycle the revenue. My bill would have cut payroll taxes. The CCL proposal and the Climate Leadership Council proposal is to do a dividend, which we think is a fine policy too. Has the benefit of political support because people would like to receive that check. So like the Alaska Permanent Fund, I don't think any Alaskans complain about getting that check. And so they're very supportive of activities in Alaska that produce that revenue. So same way, that's a good argument in favor of the dividend. Others want to reduce income taxes, personal income taxes. That's my friend Art Laffer would do that. Stephen Moore at Heritage Foundation, interestingly enough, told Alex Bosmosky in a debate recently that he would favor a flat tax in exchange for a carbon tax. And so we're excited about that. So we're open to all those. And some people would reduce corporate income taxes. My friend Kevin Hassett, the president's chairman of the Council of Economics Advisors, believes that's the best way to recycle the revenue. That's probably the hardest political move there because not much demand at the moment for further corporate tax reduction. But so, and then so Richard, we're open to all of those. But you make the case right quick for the climate for citizens climate lobby position. It's a politically salient approach, right? In other words, give people a check and they like it. Oops, we got you muted. We got to get you unmuted. Hold on. Let's see if we can. I think you're still muted, Richard.
Actually,
there we go.
I was talking all by myself and none of you were responding. I got some feedback that my voice is a little quiet. Can you hear me okay, Bob?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Wonderful.
So
okay.
let me unmute. What happened to Richard? He was telling me he was going to give me the case, but
okay, here, well, I'll unmute them. Okay, Richard, you're going.
Richard, go again.
You are unmuted.
Yes, well, there you are. Okay.
All right. Yeah, to get more political support, the dividend back to the households is intended to, for one thing, answer the criticism that might say, well, it might hit the poor. The carbon tax might hit the lower incomes because they would be paying it out and so on. So the dividend portion was calculated to cover probably 2/3 of the income levels, up to 2/3 of the population, and that's maybe roughly $60,000 or $70,000 level or something like that, possibly. So, and that would kind of offset the poor portions of that system. And it's true, and it would be a flat tax, a flat dividend, so that the poorest would actually come out a little bit ahead, I suppose. And the conservative criticisms of that might say, well, that's income redistribution or something. And in a sense, it would be a little bit if we divided it up equally amongst the households in the whole country, and the richer would be having more cost in their products, airplane rides and so forth. But it seems like we'd get more buy-in for that.
Yeah.
And it has freedom of choice. So it has the freedom of choice element. No one is forcing anybody to spend a lot on their carbon footprint or increase their carbon footprint or to buy a lot of jet planes and trips and so forth. So it's up to them to reduce their actual spending. But at the same time, the carbon tax feature, the main thing, the economic reason, is at work. And I agree with you too. If the carbon tax would be implemented, I personally, I'd be fine with whatever they can agree on as far as where the money would go.
Uh-oh. Bob, I think you're muted.
Let's see, there we go. Now I'm on. Oh yeah, what I was going to say is thank you, Richard. And I just wanted to underscore something that he said. And what we in the, they're advancing this idea of a carbon tax, need to admit is a carbon tax by itself is regressive. It does hit poor people. But if you recycle the revenue in appropriate ways, then you overcome that regressivity. And so one of the ways is the way that Rich was just describing, through the dividend. That goes a long way to reducing regressivity. And the other way is if you were to reduce payroll taxes, the Congressional Budget Office says that the bottom 70 percentile would do better in that new situation where we're taxing carbon dioxide and untaxing payroll. Because the payroll tax we've got now is the most regressive tax we've got. Anybody working, whether they're working at McDonald's or Microsoft, they pay 12.4% on that first dollar of income as a payroll tax, a FICA tax. You only see the 6.2% on your check, but the employer, whether it's McDonald's or Microsoft, is paying the other 6.2, which would otherwise come to that person as wages. So it's 12.4%. It's a whopping tax. So if you reduce that and put the tax on carbon dioxide, the Congressional Budget Office says the bottom 70% do better. The people who do a little bit worse in that situation are people that, like Rich was saying, fly around on corporate jets. At republicEn.org, by the way, we don't think that's bad. Even if you want a corporate jet, you want a heated pool, that's fine. Just pay for what you take, because we think it's a rather conservative principle that in the salad bar of life, take what you want, but pay for what you take. Because otherwise, the people at salad bar can only offer iceberg lettuce and Thousand Island dressing, right? Because but if everybody pays by weight, they can offer the sliced turkey and the nice mushrooms but you got to pay for what you take. And so we think that's bedrock conservatism. What else you got, Wen? What are the questions?
Okay, let's see. Cindy Burbank had a question about what has changed with business positions. So Cindy, if you would like to ask your question, I've unmuted you if you want to ask Bob directly. Cindy?
Here's hoping I get to see Cindy. And
I'm here, but I could not hear Wen's question.
Oh.
Well, I wanted to give you a chance to ask Bob your question about what has changed in terms of business.
Yeah, I just wondered if you could comment on if in the 10-year period you talked about you've seen shifts in the business sector on this issue.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy, and thank you for your support. You're wonderful to help us. Yeah, we've seen some changes. You know, more and more businesses are realizing the impacts and the opportunity too. And so, yet another group that's in the Eco-Right or working in the Eco-Right series has a large group of businesses that are making the case for carbon pricing. It just makes sense that, you know, if you're a while back, a guy named Kevin Parker at Deutsche Bank told me something very interesting in his office in New York. He said, he ran Deutsche Investments, and he said, if a company can't show us a declining carbon footprint going forward, they're not going to get our investment money. Because he says, we assume, and the whole world really, and the smart money, if you will, assumes that a carbon constrained future is coming through some sort of pricing of carbon dioxide. And if you can't show a steadily declining carbon footprint, then it's bad for your business. And so you need to figure out some way to pull up out of that death spiral you're in about driving more and more carbon dioxide into the air. So we're seeing a lot of businesses take that to heart and realize that they've got to change their processes and figure out a way forward. Probably, Cindy, the most notable ones would be ExxonMobil. And I'm so glad that they're supporting our friends at Climate Leadership Council. And they've signed on to that proposal, in fact. Now, it's also true that ExxonMobil wants immunity from lawsuits on that and as part of that proposal. But it's also true that ExxonMobil sells a lot of natural gas as well as petroleum. And it was put to me quite bluntly by somebody who I respect at ExxonMobil, who said to me, we sell petroleum and natural gas. If you put a price on carbon dioxide, we sell a lot more natural gas and we beat coal better than we're beating it now. That's why we're for a carbon tax. And so I thought, oh, this is great. I can go tell fellow conservatives that ExxonMobil is just trying to make money. Because what else would be believable, right? They're not an eleemosynary corporation. They're in the business of making money. And so we're for them at republicEn.org. Maybe this is one of our oddities at republicEn.org is we're for the free enterprise system. We're for ExxonMobil making money. We think it's great that they make money. because they create wealth, and they're retired teachers that own their stock. Well, good for them. And so if they can sell a product that has 50% less CO2 called natural gas, and can beat coal, well, hats off. Go have at. Now, does that mean that natural gas is going to be the end-all fuel? No, don't think so. When we get better storage and better batteries, better solar efficiency, I think natural gas is going to go the way of the hula hoop, just like coal is going the way of the hula hoop. So, my kids tell me they don't know what that hula hoop thing is, because they say, what is a hula hoop? Has it gone out of business? Well, apparently it hadn't. Some people really do still enjoy the hula hoop, but probably not as much as they did as when I was a kid. But anyhow, so yeah, that's, Cindy, the difference is that some companies are coming on board and are realizing an opportunity here to create jobs, create wealth by selling better products. And if I could just give an illustration that I heard a long time ago from Newt Gingrich about innovation. Newt used to tell us that the railroads were in the transportation business, the people moving business. They had capital, they had customers. And when airplanes were invented, they could have gone into the business of becoming airlines. People won't fly. Well, they were wrong. And their business declined. They could have gone into the airline business. Same thing for anybody making coal-fired electricity right now. You got capital, you got customers. Why don't you innovate? Why don't you get into some other business? And of course, again, as conservatives at republicEn.org, we think that makes sense. I'm used to conservatives saying, I can't help you if you're a buggy whip manufacturer. When the Ford was invented, Henry Ford destroyed your business in the buggy whip manufacturing business, but I can't help you because that's the creative destructionism of the free enterprise system. And conservatives are usually for that because society is bettered when Henry Ford invented the car. And so the new storage systems are coming if the economics are set right, the new better batteries, the new better efficiency out of solar cells. Pretty exciting. But if you're in an old, dirty fuel business, it's not going to go well for you. But if you're smart, you'll innovate quickly. So thanks, Cindy.
Yeah. Okay, let's see if we can knock out a few of these nuts and bolts questions real quick. Trudy Heller asks, what exactly is taxed with a carbon tax?
Great question. So presumably it'd be this, an upstream application, which means that you would tax petroleum and Jet A and diesel fuel and everything, refined gasoline, all the things passing through a pipeline. You'd apply the tax right there, and at the mine, literally as it leaves the mine, it would be taxed. The reason for doing it upstream is that there are under 2,000 companies that either mine coal or put stuff in a pipeline. So it'd be a very simple job for the IRS. 2,000 taxpayers is a very small job for the IRS. And so, and understand that whatever is passing down that pipeline, we know scientifically how much CO2 is going to be generated when it's burned. Because we know the properties of that diesel or the properties of the Jet A or the properties of the gasoline. And we know the properties of the coal too, the different kinds of coal. And some produce more CO2 than others. And so we know that. These are discernible facts. And so that's how the tax will be applied. Now, of course, here's the thing that we've got to be honest about, is that means when you put that price on at the mine, at the pipeline, it's not like it's magic and it goes away. No. That price ripples all down the supply line of everything that we buy. But again, this is a conservative concept that we hold pretty dear, which is that you want it to be that way. Because again, you want accountability. We conservatives believe that blessings come from accountability. Havoc results from a lack of accountability. Climate change is that havoc. And so what we do is we make all of ourselves accountable. And then we're paying for what we take out of the salad bar.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's see. D. Suter would like to ask how a carbon tax is a market-based solution. Isn't it a government solution?
Yeah, good question. It does involve government, right? Because the only, this is a role for government, we believe, as conservatives, and we learned that from Milton Friedman, actually. There's a great clip that I love to show, and some of you probably have experienced me showing it, which is, and you can see it on our website. If you go to the media tab, you'll see it, I think, right at the top of that media tab. You'll see Milton Friedman on the Phil Donahue show in the 1980s. Phil Donahue is a liberal, and he asked Dr. Friedman, one of Reagan's economics advisors, what do you do about pollution then, Dr. Friedman, if you don't want to regulate it? And Friedman says, well, you tax it, of course. You tax pollution. And so then he goes on to explain that there's a case for the government. And yes, this is Milton Friedman, a father of modern conservatism, a hero of libertarians, saying that, yes, there's a role for government here, because when, and he explains better than I'm explaining it here, when two parties do something that affects a third party, then the government needs to step in and bring accountability for the things that are happening to that third party. Well, that's exactly what's happening in climate change. Is it when I drive my car, I and ExxonMobil are in this together. They're making a product, I'm burning it, I'm creating emissions. Those are affecting people currently and future generations. I need to pay for those impacts. And if those impacts get attached to that fuel, then just watch the innovation that's going to happen. It's going to be pretty exciting to have an energy revolution where new forms of energy come to the market. They're right now on benches in labs that need investors. We got inventors. We need investors. Well, the investors will come once the economics are fixed, and that's what pricing carbon is all about: is fixing the economics.
That's right. Thanks, Bob. Okay, their next question comes from our friend Jim Tolbert. He would like to know what is the best way to support Republicans in Congress. And actually, Jim, I will unmute you so you can extrapolate.
Yes, we got to have Jim. We got to have Jim unmuted.
Yeah, thanks.
Hello, Jim.
Hi. Yeah, you spoke so eloquently about all the great statements and op-eds that members of Congress are publishing and saying and putting out there, even on like the GOP's House Energy and Commerce Committee. What do you think we can do to both support those people that step out and make those statements like you've done in the past, as well as encourage them to take the next step and support legislation?
Mostly continue to grow, Jim. Grow the conservative caucus at Citizens Climate Lobby. We need you big, and so we want to we partner with you to grow you big and us big, because that's what we try to show. A lot of politics, is, we all know, is who you got with you, and so that's what politicians are looking for, is how many you got with you, and so. We need a lot more with us. We need a lot more with Citizens Climate Lobby, Conservative Caucus. We need a lot more with republicEn.org. We need a lot more, getting the stuff of Niskanen and R Street. We need a lot more people to show themselves. And so yeah, what it takes really is, you've heard me say this before, Jim, that it's like this, our challenge in this hyper-partisan world that we're in, which, by the way, I think comes from the fact that we're inundated with so much information that we need somebody to pre-digest it for us a little bit. We got so much information. You can go on the internet and you can find about anything. Don't look about health questions because you'll be, if you're like me, you'll be convinced you got everything that you're reading about. But anyway, we get all this information coming at us. We need somebody to help us pre-digest it. And so we look for who's carrying the red flag, who's carrying the blue flag. If you're generally a progressive, you look for the blue flag. If you're a conservative, you look for the red flag, and you follow those people. And so then what happens is, if you're a politician, you don't want any daylight between you and the right-hand wall if you're a conservative. And if you're on the left, you want no daylight between you and the left-hand wall. And so you slam yourself up on that wall. So the people who are most important to getting climate action are actually, I was going to say one, but now I'm going to add a second one. So this is new material for me, Jim. And Alex Bosmowski is watching and saying, I better get this down. Or Wynn is saying, we better get this down. Chelsea Henderson may be listening too. Is there are two groups. One is people on the right. That's what Jim and I and others are doing, is trying to generate this support on the right. So when that member of Congress just comes a little bit off these crazy positions that Republicans have taken over the last decade or so, and they start moving toward a reasonable position, which is, yes, we got a solution. We got a solution. How about you? And that solution is in free enterprise, is just support them, stand in that gap as they move off that wall. And so that's where we've got to have numbers. The second group, this is new material, is it's somehow on the left. We've got to help them not to form their own Tea Party that tosses good ideas into the harbor, because it's a good thing to have, a Tea Party. That historical Tea Party, that was a wonderful thing back in Boston, right? I'm not criticizing that, but I'm reading the biography of Alexander Hamilton right now, and he was like Mr. Adams, quite concerned about too many revolutions. And so what's happening over here on the left right now is the formation perhaps of a left-wing Tea Party that may make it so that we can't get agreement on a reasonable solution that Citizens Climate Lobby, for example, has been so effective in supporting. And so not only do we need, Jim, for you to grow on the right wing, but we need others, the progressives at Citizens Climate Lobby, to somehow not quell the enthusiasm, because we want the enthusiasm of the Green New Deal, but we need them to see that, you just can't expect to solve all the problems of the world in one non-binding resolution, okay? So how about let's focus on climate change and come back later for a discussion about universal basic income. That's a valid discussion, and Milton Friedman, who I just mentioned, has some views on that. But you can come back for that later, all right? And so somehow, a second important group here, not just people on the right, is reasonable people on the left who can keep us from going in the ditch on the left-hand side of the street. We've been in the ditch on the right-hand side of the street. We don't need to now cross the center line and head to the ditch on the left-hand side of the street. Let's get it up on the pavement is the idea. Thanks, Jim. Wait, who you got?
Okay, let's see. Next on the docket, the next question. Davis George Moy says, considering how often IRC changes, how can we have confidence that a carbon tax would remain in place for long? Let's see, I'm going to try to unmute Davis George. Okay, can you say something?
So good afternoon. It's pretty much exactly that. I mean, every 2 years or so, there's going to be a major tax overhaul, and things never get more simple. So how do we overcome any skepticism people have that we're just making the IRC even thicker, which is just paying more tax accountants to do work to deal with government?
Yeah, great question. In two parts. One is, yes, the code generally does get more complicated all the time, but remember, this is a pretty simple addition to the code. This is 2,000 taxpayers, so that's pretty neat. The second thing, though, is that it would be a bad outcome if we did what Australia did. Australia did a carbon tax, undid it, did it, undid it. That doesn't work. If you're trying to spark innovation, You need a predictable price on carbon dioxide. You need it to be steadily rising. We can go into that if you want to, the substitution effect. I sound like an economist. I'm not. But it's important to have it steadily rising, because as people see the price signal, they will move away from it, and there'll be declining revenues. Particularly in the bill that I had, if you're talking about cutting payroll taxes, that's what funds Social Security. So you can't make Social Security any worse than it already is. It's bad, by the way. As a conservative, I'm happy to say, because I'm not running for president, it is a Ponzi scheme. And Mitt Romney was right when he said that in Florida. But anyway, so we're conservatives, right? We can say that. And so you couldn't make it any worse. So you got to have, if the substitution effect's going to come to play here, you had to tip up the taxes constantly rising to overcome that effect. But I'm giving too much complexity here. Just to answer the question is, you're right, is how do you get people to continue to support the policy? And that, as Richard was saying earlier, is one of the best arguments for the dividend approach of both Citizens Climate Lobby and Climate Leadership Council, is it creates a political constituency for that increasing check. Because as the steadily rising carbon tax goes up, there'd be a slightly larger check. And of course, the substitution effect is going to trim that some, but still it'd be presumably rising. So that's a way to keep support for it. But you're right, it is really important that when we do this, that we stay predictable. And that's, and you're right to sound like a tax lawyer, because it is it's the standard problem in taxation, is that how do I know that this investment tax credit is going to last? I don't know whether you're going to change the depreciation schedule on me. So I need predictability. If I'm in business, I need to know how much of this new machine, what the depreciation schedule is, because otherwise I can't make a rational decision. So if we do this, and obviously we all want to do it at republicEn.org, we need to build strong support for it. And that's another reason to say to those folks on the left, don't do this on the left alone. You really need to have a policy that works for both the left and the right on the pavement, not in the ditches on the right or the ditches on the left, but on the pavement, because you got to keep support going for this. Don't do this on one side of on the street, because if you do, it'll be undone. Ask about Obamacare. Ask about various other things that President Obama did. They're being undone. And so we can't do what Australia did here. We've got to stay consistent.
So that segues well to the next question from Kevin Mulvey, who asks, how concerning is it that the leading carbon fee and dividend bill in Congress right now is so heavily co-sponsored by Democrats, very few Republicans?
It's of concern. And can we unmute him, or is he? Do you want to? Or is he?
Let's see. Let me try. Kevin, if you are there, you'll be able to speak now.
Bob, hi there.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah, that's the essence of the question. And I'm a CCL member, and I live in a very liberal members district, but I used to be a Schedule C political appointee, so I'm happy to have your group and others around. But this only works over time if it's genuinely bipartisan. And I worry that it's on the verge of potentially becoming identified as a Democrat issue.
Yeah, it's, well, and of course it has been culturally marked. Don't worry about it being on the verge. I think that's where we've been. And so we and people like Jim Tolbert and others that are working on the right are trying to remark that as, no, this is bedrock conservatism here. And so that's the problem that came out of the Great Recession. You know, remember, prior to the Great Recession, Newt Gingrich was on the couch with Nancy Pelosi in 2008, early 2008, We don't agree on much, do we, Newt? No, Nancy, but we agree climate change is real. That was early '08. By the end of '08, Newt Gingrich had switched to the other side. We don't know whether climate change is real. Well, so did others. And the result was it became sort of a liberal thing. It said you're a liberal if you were for climate action. I don't know how that happened, because the strangest thing is that to proceed pell-mell in the face of risk strikes me as a very unconservative thing to do. In fact, it strikes me as crazily liberal to proceed pell-mell in the face of risk. Conservatives are usually people, not just in political philosophy, but in personality, avoid risk. And so what's happening now, thankfully, is people are beginning to see the risk. As I was saying earlier, the impacts that we're seeing here and now are causing many conservatives to say, well, wait a minute, if I can't drive my car from Tybee into Savannah on a clear day, something's up. It's not that the hurricane's here, it's that the level of the water has come up. If you drive that brand new car through that salt water, let me tell you, that car isn't brand new very long anymore after that. And so we're being made aware of it, right? And so I think what's an important role for people like you who are self-identify as progressive at Citizens Climate Lobby especially, is again to talk to these folks on the left to make sure that they don't try to drive a solution that is so far over there in the ditch on the left-hand side of the road that it's very similar to the problem that my party has had on the right-hand side of the road. And so really, can you get up on the pavement? And so that's what, but in other words, don't worry about it being, it has been marked. We're in the process of remarking it. But now a new front has emerged, is talk to people on the left that they don't drag us way over there onto the left-hand side of the road. Essential that it be bipartisan. You're exactly correct.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, so just as a time check, we have about 8 minutes left here. So I think we have time for a few more questions, hopefully. Let's see. Stuart Birnbaum would like to have a little more information about the border adjustment. What details can you provide as to the implementation of the border adjustment?
Great. So Stuart, that's a, we go around saying that we're for a revenue neutral, border adjustable carbon tax. And my ad guy keeps telling me, Bob, you can't say that. That sounds, it sounds like you got marbles in your mouth, man. Revenue neutral, border adjustable carbon tax. Okay, so revenue neutral, we've been talking about that. That's where you cut taxes somewhere else or you dividend all the money back. Border adjustable means that you apply the tax at the borders. And countries that don't have a carbon tax in their own country pay that tax on entry. Now, here's something that we, because everybody here is pretty knowledgeable about how that works, here's something that I think we've got to admit. That would be a pretty difficult job for a brand new agency at the federal government. But that agency would have this enormous task, and they'd set it up, and then it'd be in operation about 2 weeks. And then they could shutter it because we believe that the whole world would follow us. So it'd be like you got to set it up in order to have a credible deterrent. In other words, to say something like nuclear weapons, you got to have them in order to have a credible deterrent. But you set up that agency and you say, okay, we are prepared here in the United States. Now, conservatives listening, make sure you hear this. No international agreement, although I strongly believe we should not have withdrawn from Paris, but there's no international agreement here. It's just a move by the United States. We're in control that says we're going to tax carbon dioxide here in America. And if you don't have the same price on carbon dioxide in your country, when your goods come through our ports, we're going to collect that tax for you and you're going to remit it to Washington. China challenges that in the World Trade Organization. We think they lose based on precedents in the chemical industry. After they lose, they within 24 hours have the same price on carbon dioxide because they do reach consensus very easily in China, and so they would do the same thing. The reason is that they'd otherwise be paying a tax on entry to the United States that they could have collected in China and remitted to Beijing, but now they are having that tax collected for them at a port in America, and the money is going to Washington. So 24 hours later, after losing in the WTO, they got the same price on carbon dioxide. And then the rest of the world follows. Because if you're doing business anywhere in the world, you're doing business with the United States and China. And then that whole agency that got set up, like I say, it gets shuttered because it's like the whole world then comes to this internalized price of carbon dioxide. So it's put on the products. And the beauty of that is then you've got 7 billion people looking for cleaner, cheaper, faster fuels. And that's pretty exciting. Then you've got that energy revolution, not just 325 million Americans, but 7 billion people around the world looking for innovation. And so the border adjustment, while it does sound like marbles in your mouth to say revenue neutral and border adjustable carbon tax, is essential because we've got to get the whole world in on this. Because if we do it just by ourselves, it's not worth doing. Because then what you do is you have people pick up and move from here to places where they can emit for free. They emit more when they get there. And so we lose jobs and we lose the race to reduce emissions. So double losers unless the border adjustment works. So it's crucial to just go ahead and set up that agency, even though it would live for about 2 weeks.
All right. Let's see. Andy Panelli. He's asking, what is your estimate of the number of Republicans in Congress that are ready to acknowledge climate change is real and caused by humans, like Shimkus and Upton? So do you have an estimate of the number of Republicans in Congress who are climate realists?
It's hard to estimate, isn't it? I mean, it'd just be a wild guess, but I got to believe that, given the age of most people in Congress, a lot of them have kids that are at State U, and they're coming home at Easter break, spring break, and they're going to say to mom and dad, I heard what you said on the floor. It's not what I'm learning at State U. I mean, it's just, it's not. And so I think that a large percentage of Republican House and Senate members know that it's real and know that it's human caused because they've got smart kids, and those kids are coming home and talking to them at spring break, and they know that it's real. The question is whether they can survive a Republican primary. Resemble this remark, whether you can survive a Republican primary if you establish some daylight between you and the right-hand wall. Again, back to what I was saying to Jim Tolbert, we got to fill that space so that Republicans hear us cheering them on, saying, yeah, step forward like Milton Friedman would have and solve this thing. So I'm not giving you a specific percentage because I don't know, but I think it's substantial. I think it's over 50%. Clearly no. And to the point that was made earlier, we don't need all of these, but we do need a substantial bipartisan majority to act on this so that it's durable.
Amen. Okay, well, we have 1 minute left, and we were not able to get through all the questions. Huge apologies if you did not get your question asked. This was a wonderful discussion. And briefly, before we say goodbye, I wanted to just share a couple more resources that we have on our website with all of you. So you should be able to see, I'm hoping, there, our website. This is republicen.org. And if you go to the left here and say you want to learn more, which I'm sure we all do, we have a carbon tax FAQ page, which goes over the basics of how a carbon tax works and the kind of carbon tax policy that we promote. And you can share this with your friends and other people who want to know more information. So I think this is a great resource. Also, if you want to do more than learn and you want to take action, we invite you to take action with us at republicEn by going to our ACT page and go to our Action Center, where we have lots of actions that you can take, whether it's writing to your member of Congress or sending a tweet out or signing a petition. Please do speak up. We need more people on the eco rights speaking up. We are underrepresented in the environmental movement, and we really need to make our presence known. So with that, I would just like to close before I send it to Bob for the final word by saying that we will be sending a follow-up email after this with a post survey to ask what you thought of this webinar. Also, some more resources will be attached. And thank you very much for joining. And Bob, any final words?
Yes, thanks everybody for being part of this. And I hope you share with me this optimism that things are starting to change. It's really pretty exciting. It's been, frankly, a slog for a while, but now things are turning. And it's time to pour it on. So thank you to all the folks that are doing that. Please redouble your efforts now, because this is crucial time. And particularly to please welcome conservatives into the conversation. You know, the least productive thing to do is say something like, well, so you were the dumb kid in the class, the last one to get it, huh? We really don't want to come off that way. What we want to come off with is, okay, so you didn't like the solution before. You didn't like the Clean Power Plan. You didn't like the cap and trade system. How about this cleaner, fresher approach of a carbon tax? And yes, it's different than the Green New Deal. And no, we don't want to go in the ditch on the left-hand side of the road. So welcome people into the conversation and show them, if you're a little bit left, that you're willing to work with them and stay on the pavement. And if they're like us on the right, welcome those that are coming, from a place where they realize it is pretty silly. And so give them some space to turn that around and to say, I just didn't like the solution before. Now I see a solution that would work. Yes, this fits with what Milton Friedman would say. I thought Wynn was going to click on that media tab. Go to the media tab and see that Milton Friedman clip. That's what you could do now for the afternoon. So thanks for having me and joining us on this call.
Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you at our next webinar. Take care and have a great day.
See ya.